What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to be working on some of my Black Ezo Spruce 4-year-olds going into their 5th growing season and talking about being in fear versus a Cavalier attitude for working on your bonsai. So I've only ever grown Norway spruce prior to the batch that I'm working on now, and I've found these trees to actually be pretty vigorous growers here in the Bay Area. I was a little bit surprised because spruce tend to be a cold climate plant, and so maybe it's been the mild summers that we've been having for the last couple of years. In any case, in the spring, what I'm typically doing to spruce, based on the other spruce that I've had, is to come in and pinch off these new tips so that you can create a more dense branching structure. Now, because the only thing I've ever done to this entire batch of trees that I'm working on is to clip off a few long branches and do a little bit of wiring to the bases of the trunk, there's actually a lot of work to be done. So I'm going to go through and start by pinching out a lot of these buds, then thin out some of the buds, and also take a look at any whorls or clusters of branches that are forming on the trunk. When I'm teaching students, I frequently see two different ends of the spectrum of being sort of comfortable with working on your trees. So at one end of that spectrum are people who will basically do anything to their tree and really not worry about it, sometimes to the detriment of the tree. And on the other end of the spectrum are people who are literally afraid to touch the tree.
Fear comes from either a lack of knowledge or a thinking that you are going to permanently damage, destroy, or otherwise mess up the plant that you're growing. So when my students say, I don't work on it by myself, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to work on this tree, what I say is that you shouldn't have just one tree. So if I only have this one tiny spruce here rather than a whole bunch of spruce, I might not realize some of the differences between the way that they grow. So this one is not coming out quite yet at the same speed that these guys are, so it's not time to pinch it because the buds haven't elongated yet. That type of comparison is really useful to overcome that sense of fear that you have. The other thing I would say is, if you have a tree that's really important to you and you don't want to chance messing it up, then go find a tree of the same species, but maybe that's smaller or less important to you, and do experimentation on the tree that's not important so that you can understand how those trees will react to the work that you're doing. And once you have that sense of understanding, then you won't be so trepidatious about touching the tree that's actually important to you. Being cavalier with your trees might actually be the harder of the two problems to solve. And that's because if you are just gung-ho and going in and scissoring off things and or wiring and bending things, that's fantastic. You've overcome all of your fears about working on trees, but you perhaps are doing that from a place where you don't understand that doing too much work to a tree can be detrimental to the tree. So when we work on trees, we want to get the timing right. And in terms of timing, coming back to these spruce as the example, I am looking at the spring growth here, and I know where this tree is going to grow for the year. So with spruce, they are going to send out this one spurt of growth per year. It can be pinched, and then they're going to set buds, and the majority of the growth that's going to happen for the rest of the year will just be in preparation for next spring. So if I just go in here and remove all of this growth, then I'm not really harnessing the tree. I see that done with people who get the timing wrong on Japanese black pine cut back and decandling. If you remove the candles in spring, then the tree will just issue more candles immediately and you still get long internodes and long needles. So if you find that you're unable to stop yourself from working on the tree, I think the advice is the same. Go find some more trees to work on and use those to explore, but really stop and think about what you're doing. If you find that you're always kind of overworking your trees, think about, am I doing this work to further the aesthetics or health of the plant, or am I doing this work because I'm bored or for some reason that serves me rather than the tree? I think it's important to recognize that we can almost, for the most part, with many trees, you can't keep a tree looking perfectly healthy and in top condition all the time. You have to have periods where the tree is going to look a little bit messy or less refined than it would otherwise. And as I go through and pinch off tips on these, this is an early development project, and so I'm not thinking about that type of thing, but what I am thinking about is containing the growth on these to make them more like something that you would find in a forest setting, so that if I want to make group plantings from them, I have short branches with lots of divisions and no whorls. And I'm scissoring off the ones that already have a little bit of wood in them, the ones that have extended more, while I pinch off the ones that are still smaller and more tender. Also concentrating on just pinching the ones or scissoring the ones that are sort of further up and further out, and then leaving the buds that are in the interior to run a little bit, because that will increase the density of the plant overall. I think these guys are really beautiful, the way that the spring growth kind of comes out and forms like sort of a fuzzy little green rabbit foot or something like that. And it's almost a shame that I have to come in here and sort of half destroy that. But the pinching process is the difference between these guys being just sort of wild, shaggy young trees and actually turning them into bonsai. So with this little one, I don't actually have to wait until the buds have elongated more to be able to see what's going on, because I can see where the buds are swelling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of remove some of the bar branches here, thinking about the same sort of thing. Like if this were put into a forest with the larger ones, then I would still want it to be smaller and more dense. So I'm cutting off slightly longer shoots, removing, so here's a reasonably, it's not exactly opposite each other, but I'm going to take off this entire branch. And then these guys up here are definitely bar branches. And I want to keep the plant more dense and compact. So I'm cutting back longer side branches in favor of shorter ones, and just sort of thinning out things that are not needed. And now as these begin to come out and look more like that, I'll consider pinching the tips here to further increase the density. So hopefully the takeaway from this video is that you think about what you're doing, and if you're nervous about working on a plant, find another copy of that plant at a garden center or on Bonsaify.com and use it as a guinea pig so that you can understand what happens when you do work to a tree. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is have the type of knowledge that allows you to predict exactly what the tree is going to do in response to the work that you perform on it each time. That wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.